Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Sunday, August 29th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 4 days. The game against Michigan in 90 days. The first full Saturday of the college football season is this week. Week one includes a couple of huge games between big name programs, a couple of very, very big games in the Big Ten as well. Wanted to take a look at some of those matchups as well as some of the bigger picture things for the season on the whole. My guest today is longtime friend of the program, Brett Ciancia of Pick6Previews.com. Easy for me to say. Brett, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for having me back on. Appreciate it. I was on Buckeye Scoop with Alex earlier this preseason, and it's great to be back on the show. And for listeners out there, I hope I make it three in a row, three years consecutive picking Ohio State to make the playoff. I had it in 19 when most had Michigan, actually. Everyone had it last year, so I'm looking to make it three in a row with you guys.
Well, I going through this year's book, I looked at you've got a media section, and I was very, very happy to see Buckeye Scoop in there on your, hey, I've appeared on these media outlets. You've been on this show a number of times. You've been on Alex's show a few times. So happy to see us represented in there. But I mean, as I said, you've been on a number of Buckeye Scoop shows, but for folks who might not remember, you have had the most accurate preview in the Power 5 conferences since you launched the magazine. This is your 10th year. You have been rated by Stasson.com the most accurate preview of any Power 5 conference preview magazine. How much of a challenge was this year's edition to continue that streak, coming off of such a weird limited season last year, plus all the transfer portal craziness? I mean, this year had to present some pretty significant challenges putting the book together this year.
Oh, for sure, Tom. I mean, this is my 10th year doing it, and this was by far the 10th hardest. I mean, it was a lot more difficult than usual. And a lot of factors were unique to 2020, like the shortened season, the inconsistent amount of games. It's a one-man show over here. It's a one-man operation. So I'm doing all 65 Power 5 teams and across leagues and across conferences and divisions. So I'll be looking at the Pac-12 and see Arizona State played 4 games, and then look at Alabama, who played a whole schedule. So inconsistent number of games, quarantine times that hit certain rosters at certain times, and position groups got hit worse than others. Then you had the transfer portal boom that was out of control. It was crazy, the roster movement going on. And then also the NCAA gave an extra eligibility. So guys that would have normally been in their 5th years and graduating out and heading onto the pros or careers, they're now back again. So much extra context. I love it. I dug in deeper than ever. I mean, calling head coaches, calling coordinators, watching the game tapes, the spring games, anything I can get my hands on, and then running my numbers and putting this book together. So by far the deepest dive yet. And I just can't wait to get back to real football this week coming up.
Well, yeah, the season kicked off yesterday with week 0, but it really starts in earnest this Thursday. Ohio State opens that night at Minnesota. Buckeyes favored by a couple of touchdowns. Is there anything about this Gopher team that you think could present an issue for Ohio State? I mean, at least enough of an issue to keep things interesting for 4 quarters.
Yeah, well, Minnesota definitely has some bright spots. I mean, of course, in 2019, they had a historic season back to their 1960s levels, but a little bit of a step back last year. But yeah, you still have a solid offense there. You have Tanner Morgan back his 3rd year as a starter. Muhammad Ibrahim, the nation's leader in yards per game and touchdowns per game. He didn't get enough attention last year because it was a smaller schedule size, but excellent player there, a tough runner, a big offensive line, 5 starters back. You could even call it 6 starters back. By getting the big guy, Daniel Falale, back fully healthy. So there's a lot to like. Defensively is where the questions start because they had a strong year in 2019. It was a lot of 4th and 5th year guys that were recruited before Fleck arrived. And that really fell apart last year once those guys graduated. In 2020, they were one of the worst defenses in the conference. So how do they bounce back? Can Fleck build a defense out of his own recruits? We'll see. But the offense is going to have to carry them if they have any shot in this game.
Well, one thing I'll just mention this real quick, as this is going to be a storyline we're watching all week. Chris Autman-Bell, who is kind of their projected number 1 receiver coming into this year with Rashad Bateman gone from last year, obviously. He is still, his status for the game up in the air. He had a leg injury Friday afternoon. PJ Flexi said he had, quote, been doing some running, which doesn't sound particularly optimistic with the game less than a week away. But that's something we were going to be following throughout the week because that could make a big difference in terms of how multiple how effective they might be in the passing game, in addition to the threat of Mo Ibrahim on the ground. The big one this weekend, though, is Clemson and Georgia. And we're going to talk about your college football playoff picks later on in the show. So I have a feeling I know where you're leaning on this one. But What do you see being the deciding factor between the Tigers and the Bulldogs this weekend?
Yeah, so this is a foundational pick for really the season, the playoff outlook, and really my book this year, where I have Georgia beating Clemson. I know they're a field goal underdog, but this pick has been baked into my calculations for 6 months now. I really have Georgia going high this year, making the playoff. So specifically to this game, I think Georgia's front seven is a huge advantage over Clemson's offensive line. That might determine the whole game, because what made Clemson great from 17, 18, 19 was their offensive line and their run push with Travis Etienne. They led the nation for multiple years in yards per carry. Now in 2020, whether it be a transition up front or a different scheme or just a poor year, they fell all the way to middle of the pack, around 60th or 70th in that category. And when they couldn't establish the run in certain games like Notre Dame and Boston College, you saw near losses or losses. So I really like Georgia's defense, especially that front seven. Like I said, it's littered with 5 stars and future NFLers. So I think that's an area that they can take advantage of. Meanwhile, also, Georgia's offense really started to heat up last year. So if you watch them early in the season, September, October, it was DeJuan Mathis at quarterback. He had a different skill set. Stetson Bennett, he was a walk-on guy. But really, once JT Daniels took over after the bye week, it's a 5-star arm from California. That offense really lit up. And I think you're going to see more vertical passing, try and target that secondary. The last we saw Clemson secondary, you guys were torching them in the playoff first round. So I think you see more of that. I have Georgia winning straight up.
Well, and there are a couple huge games this weekend in the Big Ten. I mean, this is like before Labor Day, you could have 2 games, with top teams, each division going head to head that could play a big piece into who goes to Indianapolis at the end of the year for the Big Ten championship game. First game, Penn State visiting Wisconsin. I mean, those are one of the biggest challenges to Ohio State in the East, the presumptive favorite in the West. How do you see that one playing out?
Yeah, well, on a high level here, I mean, this is a huge opening weekend for the Big Ten. It's unusual for them to have such big conference matchups right out of the gate. So I'm excited. I might order in some Portillo's delivery all the way up from Chicago, really get the whole Big Ten experience. But great matchups. Yeah, with Wisconsin, Penn State, I think Wisconsin's the more proven formula right now. They have that Big Ten West formula, huge offensive line. Now it's an experienced defense again with 9 starters back for Jim Leonard there, the coordinator. And the key being, you got to look at 2020 with a grain of salt for Wisconsin, because the 2 areas of concern on their roster coming in were actually a younger offensive line and receiving threats. And the quarantines really hit those position groups the worst. So I'm throwing that out. Last year, I think Wisconsin gets back to brass tacks and really just physically outduels Penn State, who's installing a new offense. And I'm not sure they have the quarterback to do it there with Sean Clifford. We'll see. They certainly have the receivers, but I don't know how that's going to look. So I like Wisconsin there in Camp Randall to start the season.
Well, and the other one is, I mean, another team that's like right at the top of the list in the Big Ten East, Indiana, going up against what is probably the biggest challenger to Wisconsin in the West, Iowa. And I don't need to explain to an audience of Ohio State fans what can happen when a team goes into Kinnick Stadium and Iowa gets a good run at them. That happened to Ohio State in 2017. They always just seem so dangerous at home. How do you see that one between the Hoosiers and Hawkeyes shaking out? Is the Big Ten West going to go 2-0 against the East this weekend?
I'm calling for it. Yeah. Well, I mean, Ohio State will get a W, so you're not going winless. But yeah. Out of these 2 contenders, I think it's going to be a Big Ten West sweep. I really like Iowa on the season. I like them in this matchup. What makes Iowa great is their offensive line, but specifically the interior of that line. It's Tyler Linderbaum, an All-American center there. He could push for the Remington Award, best center in the country. And when Iowa has a strong interior line, their zone gap and their zone run scheme are excellent. I think they're just going to take it to Indiana's front. And Indiana, I interviewed Tom Allen last year, very charismatic guy, and it was great to see that come to fruition last year. But I want to see now, is 2021, does he have staying power, or was 2020 somewhat of a fluke? And the roster's strong all around, but there is one glaring issue. I think the defensive line. So then that doesn't match up well against Iowa's big front. So I think Iowa, it's that kind of game where they power them over and the power run game, get a lead and just squat on it and win the field position battle. A classic Kirk Ferentz game. And I think Iowa wins it.
Let's see, field position game with Kirk Ferentz and on Kinnick Stadium. I feel like I've seen that, I don't know, 40, 50 times in the last decade or so. It seems like he has one thing he does it very well, and he does it pretty consistently. That's that is going to be, it's honestly just going to be fun to see a full Kinnick Stadium and Iowa doing Iowa things again. Like that'll be fun on Saturday. What you have, I mean, like, I feel like a lot of the college football playoff previews and predictions this year are like everyone kind of has the same basic field. It's like, there are 5 teams and everyone has picked 4 of them out of a hat, and that's kind of the field. You have gone a little bit of a different direction. Your field is Oklahoma 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3. Okay, so far. And then in the 4th spot, you have North Carolina. Well, so let's start with those Tar Heels. Obviously most places, if they're picking an ACC team, they're projecting Clemson to get in. So why do you think that UNC is the team that might do it this year instead?
Yeah, so I mean, normally you might just pencil in Clemson to win the ACC and make the playoff, but this is the first time I see a legitimate threat forming from the Coastal Division across from Clemson, and it's North Carolina. And it starts with recruiting first. Mac Brown, he's stacked 3 top 15 classes now. It's all these 5-star in-state talent guys from North Carolina. The staff before him, Larry Fedora, he only locked down 10% of the local prospects, blue chippers, but Mac Brown's got 70% of them retained within the state. Great players. Offense, you've seen the offense. They finished number 3 in my numbers offensively last year. Sam Howell's the Heisman quarterback candidate back. All 5 linemen in front of them. They're drawing NFL grades. And I think they did well replacing some NFL stars on the outsides. Josh Downs starred in the bowl game. They brought in Ty Chandler from Tennessee, the 5th best running back they've had in terms of rushing yards. So offense, excellent. But what moves them from an 8-win, 9-win team up to playoff caliber in my eyes is this defense. It's quietly just surging. Again, without the spring ball, without the summer camp last year, that's when usually the younger 5-stars and 4-stars would have, gotten experience, moved up the depth chart. Instead, that had to happen for these kids in game. It had to happen in October and November, learning on the job. So what you saw was at a season scope, it was a very average defense. But over that last month, they were top 20 in all my numbers. And what that was all those young guys moving up the depth chart. So it's all back, 10 starters back, great coordinators. And I really like this schedule too. That's the key, is that I think they're going to be favored in 11 or 12 games out of 12. Almost every week they're going to be favored. So a lot to like. And I think it'll be a shootout there in Charlotte, and they have the firepower to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to go back very far for that ACC championship game to just kind of be like lost in the shuffle with all the other games of more consequence on that championship Saturday. That could be a real interesting one this year. I really didn't expect Mac Brown to do what he's done there. It's kind of, sometimes those retread coaches do just fine. Some of those retread coaches are kind of, Mac Brown didn't seem like he was trending the right direction at Texas. So it's really interesting to see him go back to UNC. And after all those years of talking on TV, and all of a sudden, boom, Mac can coach again. Mac can run a program again. And I mean, I'm sure I've heard him talk about this over the years, and probably every college football coach I've ever heard talk about college football has talked about this. Games are won in the trenches. You have Ohio State ranked among every unit in the country. They're the defensive line, number 2 in the country, the offensive line, number 1 in the country. You've got the Buckeyes in the playoff. I assume that's not a coincidence. So how big a role does that play in you picking the Buckeyes to make the playoff? And then where do you see potential vulnerabilities for this year's team?
Yeah, well, the line play is certainly important, but within the Big Ten landscape, I just see the gap being so large nowadays between Ohio State and the rest. I don't see, people were saying once Urban Meyer left and Ryan Day took over, would the recruiting stall? Would they struggle to recruit as well? And instead of just stay the same, he's actually elevated the recruiting profile, especially on offense. It's just incredible. And then you have Larry Johnson recruiting the best defensive lineman in the country too. So basically, the long story short with the Big Ten is I don't see a threat for Ohio State. Even if they trip up somewhere early in the season as a younger team, maybe Oregon clips them, or maybe Penn State or something, I just don't see a second loss coming. They'd make it 12-1. And as you guys know, with Ohio State, they always get better as that season rolls along. And once they get to Indianapolis, they just steamroll the West opponent. So it's more so that I just don't see a threat within the conference. And it's just elite recruiting. There's 4 5-star quarterbacks to pick from, and CJ Stroud's your starter, but you can't go wrong there. The same story at receiver, the deepest receiver core I might have ever seen, at least in recruiting firepower. We'll see if that converts on the field. Number one running back in the country, Henderson coming in. There's really a lot to like. And then you have two All-Americans up front, All-American caliber, I should say, with Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Fier. So a lot to like. And then defensively, Haskell Garrett already is an All-American. You have five-star Taron Vincent, Zach Harrison trying to get back to his 2019 role, Jack Sawyer coming in. So there's just so many guys. And I don't see anyone else in the conference stacking up position group by position group. So I'm going Ohio State a third straight year to make it.
Well, we kind of touched on this a little earlier with the week one preview, but this is something I agree with you on. This is the year Georgia gets over the hump against Alabama. I know the AP poll, the coaches poll disagree, and I always feel a little uncomfortable betting against Nick Saban, but maybe you can make me feel better. Why do you think this is the year that, the Dogs are making the playoff, the Tide is not?
Yeah, so with Alabama, I mean, there's not much more you can say about Nick Saban. He's built the premier dynasty of our time. It's incredible what he's pulled off. It's, I think, 9 out of 10 years they were the number one recruiter. But when you look at the recruiting stats, Georgia is right there, number 2. I mean, they're right there with Alabama. And, we talk about Nick Saban, how he can reload every year, and that's certainly true. But this one looks a little bit bigger than usual. You're talking not just one, but 3 Heisman candidates on offense gone, 2 All-American linemen up front gone, and then 6 NFL draft picks, first-round picks, that is. That's an NFL record, all gone. Not to mention the coordinator's gone. Steve Sarkisian moves on. So a lot more change than usual. Meanwhile, over at Georgia, I really like they found the right quarterback. They took a page out of LSU and Alabama's playbook, actually, by modernizing that offense finally. It used to be that Georgia was stuck in the mud, stuck in 1980 on offense, but they now have a vertical, modern passing attack. So, and you saw it come to life with JT Daniels. So I'm excited there. And then on defense, that's the given. They always have a top 3 defense under Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning. And, the front 7 I talked about earlier in the Clemson matchup, littered with NFLers and All-Americans and all-conference guys. So it's a complete team. And I see less of a transition there than what Alabama's got to go through. So I see a window of opportunity. They better execute here because Florida's transitioning over there in the East, and Alabama has a bigger reload than usual.
Well, first of all, Brett, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your insight on all this stuff. I mentioned this off the top of the show. The single most accurate preseason magazine of anyone ranking the Power 5 since you started. This is your 10th year. Number 1. It is a magazine that I do buy. I buy it every year. There are a lot of magazines. I buy Brett's every year. So let people know if they would like to buy it. And this is digital, so I know there's not a lot of time before the season, but you have time to get it at your house. You can download it very quickly. So Brett, let people know how they can get the magazine.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for buying it. I appreciate it. I appreciate the coverage you guys do. It's excellent work at Buckeye Scoop. And thanks for the listeners and followers. It's been great interacting with a ton of Buckeyes on Twitter. Very passionate group. I love it. So yeah, the book is digital. It's pick6previews.com. And on there's a couple sample teams, so you can see the layout of the page, the level of detail I go in for each team, all 65 Power 5 teams, plus BYU and Notre Dame, and Pick 6 Previews on Twitter. And also, since I know we're near kickoff here, it's instant download, and I have a discount code up there too. If you type in Buckeyes at checkout, if you're interested, you get a nice discount. Because again, I know we're close to the season, but these storylines and the writing in here, it'll last beyond kickoff. I try and dig real deep into these programs. I love every one of them. So check it out there, pick6previews.com.
And I'm sure everyone is going to be trying to kill time before kickoff on Thursday, and time is going to feel like it's running backwards at times while you're sitting at your desk. So that is definitely one way to help pass that time, checking out pick6previews.com and reading through that book. Brett, thank you again for joining me.
Thanks, Tom. Good luck this year, Buckeyes.
All right. And thanks again to Brett for taking the time to run through all that stuff with us. I love having him on. He is a wealth of knowledge, lots of great insight on a lot of stuff. And man, it is so exciting. Week 1, the real first week of college football is here. I can't wait. We'll be heading to Minnesota in just a couple days. But even before that, we have another massive event coming up, the Buckeye Scoop world premiere of the documentary Fight for Football, Saving the 2020 Season. That is coming up Monday night, tomorrow night at the Lenox Theater in Columbus. We bumped up the size of the theater so that we have a few more tickets. We have sold a bunch of those tickets for that bigger theater. There's a few left. If you hurry, you can get them. Go to fightforfootball.com, FIGHTFORFOOTBALL, fightforfootball.com. You can buy your tickets right there. just an Eventbrite link to get your tickets and reserve your spot. You'll get a chance to watch the documentary, be one of the first people in the world to see this documentary. And then we're going to have a meet and greet with and a Q&A session with Buckeye Scoop staff members. We're going to have basically the whole staff there. I mean, it's pretty much everyone that's going to be in town. Even folks from out of town will all be there. It should be a fantastic night. Can't wait for it. And that is coming up on Monday night, so you do not want to miss it. We're only doing one of these. We only have one of these scheduled right now, so this is your chance to see it. This is your chance to hang out and meet the Buckeye Scoop staff. I'm guessing we'll probably do a little bit of season preview talk and all sorts of great stuff. We're more fun in person than we are online, and it's awful fun hanging out with these guys online too. So do make sure you sign up today at fightforfootball.com to get your tickets for that. And also BuckeyeScoop.com. We have a ton of great coverage of this year's team. Lots of stuff coming out this week. It is going to be a very, very, very busy week of content leading up to that season opener Thursday in Minnesota. We may have a new staff member, a new team member joining us before that game in Minnesota. Won't that be exciting? We've been hinting at that for quite a while. It's about to happen. It is going to be awesome. I cannot wait. We'll have another member of our traveling party coming with us to Minnesota this week. So that is going to be awesome. I am very excited about that. And between that, the start of the season, the fact that Ohio State, I mean, you just heard Brett, Ohio State, very likely a college football playoff team, very likely another Big Ten championship. Seems like it would be a great time to become a member at BuckeyeScoop.com. Finally, if you are watching this on YouTube, at the end of this, you're going to get a little notification on your screen with a Buckeye Scoop logo on the right-hand corner of the screen. Just hit that logo, and what that'll do is that will subscribe you to our YouTube channel. And then every time we post a new podcast, every time we post player, coach interviews, pregame shows, postgame shows, high school games, prospect interviews, whatever it is, it's all stuff that you are going to want to see. You're all going to want to check out. So subscribe to our channel, and that way you'll get notified every time we post a new video, and you won't miss anything. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.